So today we are going to talk about question 2A on the exam, which was draw a detailed model to explain the factors contributing to the formation of different kinds of soil in a given area. And it says to be sure to provide a key and enough descriptive terms and labels to illustrate your understanding and phenomenon. So for question 2A, I am going to relate my soil model back to the acronym CLORPT. And the CL in CLORPT stands for climate. And climate most definitely affects the soil formation in many different environments. One way that it affects the environment is the temperature and moistures influence the chemical reactions that occur in, soil formation. So that includes CL as well. So CL is climate, and then for organisms. And organisms typically speed up and break down the particles. They speed up and break down the particles in the soil. So they often help with fertilization and make the soil rich. So the specific plant has the ability to grow and live a healthy life. And then for R stands for, does anybody know what R stands for? No? Okay. R stands for the term relief. And relief actually, in this context, means the shape of the land and the direction that it faces. So, in particular, I'm from Illinois, and in Illinois we have a lot of cornfields and a lot of bean fields, and during the winter it's very cold and it's hard for the plants to grow, and we are up north, obviously, in the Midwest, so it's hard for us to grow crops during the winter because of the temperature and the direction that the soil faces. However, down south, where it's nice and warm, during the winter months, there is an increased production in crops and plants and trees and all that good stuff. So soil in the south during the winter months is very wet and moist, and it's not as humid as the summer months, but it's still an ideal climate to grow plants in for soil formation. So that is relief. And then does anybody know what P stands for? P? Yes, Susie in the back? Parent material? Okay, good job. Parent material. And parent material is when the soil inherits traits from other soils in the area. So typically you have a lot of alike soils in one area. So for example, like I was saying, I live in the Midwest, and you're not going to find a soil that's very dry in the Midwest, and you're not going to find one that's moist and has characteristics of humid soil because the environment is the same. And then the T, which is the last, is the time. And T stands for time because all these factors work together over time to produce soil and to produce an ideal environment, or maybe not so ideal environment, for plant formation and growth. And over time, the particles build up, but they also at the same time break down pieces. And yes, so CL stands for climate, O stands for organisms, R stands for relief, P stands for parent material, and T stands for time. And so this is actually going to help us draw our model over here. So I'm going to go on the other side. Okay, so now to draw the model, we are going to do, first we have to start with the soil. So the soil is obviously in the bottom of that. And like I said, like I was mentioning over there in the CLORPT, there are different organisms that live in the soil. So I'm gonna draw a little ladybug. maybe some bones. I don't really know how to draw bones, but we'll just pretend that looks like a foot. And then I'm gonna draw a worm for more organisms. And then an important part of the soil formation that's found that helps the soil become more rich is the sun. The sun is an essential part, and it gives the soil nutrients to help fertilize the plants. And rain. Rain. Yes. Okay. And also we are going to put, I'm going to draw a little clock with a 12, 6, a 3, and a 9. Because the soil, it takes time for the soil to become rich and fertilized. And then I'm also going to draw a compass. So north, south, east, west. And there we have it. That is considered our soil formation model. And additionally, I'd like to point out a few things. We're going to point out the sand, silt, and clay that is found in soil in the ground. And I'd like to point out that sand does have the largest particle size and is the most dense out of all three of the different particles found in soil. And then silt comes next and has an in-between particle size between sand and clay. And then clay has the smallest particle size. And just overall, organic material is very important in the formation of soil. Excuse me. And it's very important to have different minerals and different vitamins and fertilizers that help the plants grow and keep the soil nice and fresh. Alrighty, and I am back today to teach us about question 3A on the exam, which was pick one of the following statements and critique it by providing reasoning that either supports or refutes the claim. And the claim was, the fittest organisms in a population are those that are the strongest, healthiest, and fastest, and or largest. It's actually interesting that I missed this question on the exam because I also missed the homework. I also got that incorrect. So I plan to teach this by showing you guys an example of a polar bear. And a polar bear is a great example of the survival of the fittest, but necessarily isn't the fittest organism in its environment. So 3 factors that affect the survival in an environment, which actually falls under natural selection, is an inherited trait from the parent to the offspring, and more offspring that's able to be produced than survive, and also the variations from generation to generation are inherited as they're passed along. So it's ideal for a polar bear to have a white coat because it lives in a cold and snowy environment. And this coat allows them to blend in with their surroundings because their surroundings typically consist of ice and snow and glaciers and lots of water. So it's ideal for them to have a thick white coat in order for them to stay warm and safe in their environment. And polar bears are larger animals, so people typically think that they have the ability to survive at a higher rate because of their coat and their, not their coat, their size. But this isn't necessarily the case. What helps them survive in their environment is their coat and their ability to blend in with their surroundings. And the polar bear isn't necessarily the fastest animal in its environment, but like I said before, its ability to blend in with its surroundings and camouflage and catch prey, so it's able to eat, is also because of the adaptation over time of the white coat. Okay, so the following question that I missed on the exam was question 4A. And 4A was explain how the sickle cell trait and malaria immunity is an example of an evolutionary trade-off on the continent of Africa. And so immediately when I thought of trade-off on, after I looked back at my exam, I thought about pugs. And everybody loves dogs, everybody loves pugs. And I remember in class talking about different dogs and how they were bred to have certain traits. And so an example of an evolutionary trade-off that I found was pugs. And pugs are very, very loved dogs, and they're so adorable. However, the way they were bred to become so lovable and enjoyable and fun and cute, they were bred to have smushed noses. However, over time, that has affected their breathing and has made it difficult for them to breathe. And doctors and scientists have found that this has been a negative effect for the animal. However, breeders still continue to breed them due to the demand for dogs, because everybody loves dogs and they want a cute, enjoyable dog. However, they don't necessarily know the cons to getting a pug because of the breathing problems that may occur later in life. Okay, so today we're going to learn about the characteristics of living things. And the characteristics of living things is classified by an acronym called ROADREGS. The R stands for reproduction. And the reproduction occurs when a male and female come together to produce an offspring. And there's asexual and sexual reproduction. And then next is organization. And that goes from atom to molecule to macromolecule to cell, tissue, organ, an organ system, and then the organism itself. And that's the organization of living things. A stands for adaptations. So the heritable traits that aid in sexual and asexual reproduction. And then D stands for development. And development is the differentiation of the organism and its cells as it progresses through life. And then the other R stands for regulation. And that just talks about maintaining homeostasis and maintaining a natural environment. And then E stands for energy. Processing. And that is your metabolism. And some organisms make their own food, like plants, but some organisms rely on other sources for food, such as animals or plants. And then G stands for growth, which is just the overall growth of an organism over time. And then S is the sensitivity to stimuli. And the sensitivity to stimuli, that just means, for example, If I were to touch a boiling pot of water on a hot stove, my sensitivity to the stimuli would be to pull back and draw back quickly because the stove is hot. Okay, so on the exam, I was confused with the questions 5, 8, and 9. And question 5 was based on the characteristics of living things we discussed in class. Explain 2 reasons why water is essential for living organisms. And then question 8 was said we had to classify whether the object was living or non-living. And it said the icicle outside must be alive because it grew 6 inches yesterday. And then question 9 was all living things develop and mature over time. And then a cheese commercial said that they let their cheese mature before they sell it. So I decided to pull up 2 examples from online. And the first one is a fire. And the second one is grass. Okay, grass. And we are going, as a class, we are going to say whether or not these things are living or non-living. So first, we're going to start with fire. And right away, I'm going to tell you that fire is not living. However, it does have some characteristics of living things. For example, fire does give off gases and does produce oxygen. So that would be considered regulation. And grass also has growth and development because it grows over time and helps other organisms and plants survive. However, grass is abiotic, which means it's not living for this reason. Grass is unable to reproduce, and fire is not able to reproduce in this context either. However, in fire, there is energy being made because of the different gases being given off. So for this example, fire does have some living characteristics. However, grass does not have any living characteristics. However, there may be living organisms in the grass that help the grass survive. This is a commercial for purified drinking water. Because drinking water helps you maintain homeostasis, it regulates your internal body, and it helps you grow and develop over time. Water is an essential part of life that influences growth and development and helps your body maintain homeostasis. Drink more water. Okay, so for the next lesson, we are going to be learning about species richness, and species abundance. So, number 7 on the exam pertained to diversity, and the question was, which field has the most diversity? So for mine, I decided to create 2 different fields with different diversities, and we're going to find out today which one is the most diverse. So, in environment number 2, I have incorporated 3 out of the 4 different organisms. So if you see up here, there are 11 blue circles, there are 13 pink triangles, and there are 12 stars. However, there are no orange squares. There are 0 orange squares. And then environment number 1, there is 1 blue circle, 14 squares, 4 triangles, and there are 8 stars. And so today we're going to determine which environment is the most diverse. So this environment has all the different species included, and this does not. So a relative abundance is how many species are in an environment altogether. So total, there are 36 in each environment. There are 36 total organisms in each environment. And then species richness is how many are in the species. So the species richness of the blue circle would be 11. So to determine what environment has the most diversity, we are going to talk about why biodiversity is important in environment. And biodiversity is important because each species has an important role to play in the environment, whether it be a bird, a worm, a bear, from large to small animals. Every organism is important in its environment. And speciation is the formation of a new species in an environment, and this actually may have occurred in environment number 1. And so the environment that is has the most biodiversity is actually environment number. Okay, so the environment that has the most biodiversity is actually environment 2. And so you would think that environment 1 would be the correct answer because it has every different species listed. But the gap, the number gap between each species is so large that it makes the environment not diverse at all. If you see there's an overwhelming number of squares in this environment, and in here there's 11 circles, 13 pink triangles, and 12 stars. So this environment is very well balanced and has a diverse amount of organisms in this environment. Okay, so today for natural selection, I would like to highlight, well, first of all, I'm going to be teaching natural selection and evolution. Question 1 on the exams about the fish ladder. And first off, I just like to say that natural selection is an inherited trait that's passed along to the offspring, a genetic variation that is inherited, and the ability to survival and reproduction. And so I found an article online that talks about green and gray tree frogs and how they are able to survive and reproduce in their specific particular environments. So I'm going to pass this out and have you read the article. Okay, so everybody's done reading the article now. We're going to talk about the article and how the green and gray tree frogs differ. And so in a typically like a colder environment where it's more brown and there's a lot of soil and trees and bark, the gray tree frogs typically have a higher chance of survival because they're able to blend in with the surroundings, where in a lush green foresty environment, the green tree frogs are able to survive and reproduce at a higher rate. At this way, so for the very last question, I will be talking about natural selection and evolution. And I have a lizard and I have a polar bear. And we know that lizards are unable to survive in a colder environment. And however, my friend the polar bear is able to survive in a colder environment due to his adaptations and the natural selection that has occurred over time. The polar bear has been able to has evolved over time to be able to survive in its environment. And this one of the adaptations that it has grown over time is a thicker skin that insulates the organism. And in lizards, they have scales which help them blend into their environment. And they also have camouflage, which helps them to blend in with their surroundings to protect them from predators. In this way, natural selection occurs and they're able to adapt to their environment.